So Pakistan just nominated Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize. And no, this is not satire, this is real. But before you cancel them, let's talk about why they did it. I woke up with this news and I saw that, all the media outlets were jumping to conclusions. And I have to be honest, when I saw it myself, I was also for a second like, what is happening? I immediately sent it to my friend from Pakistan saying like, you got some splaining to do. But I did think, this is something that must have had a backstory. So let me look into it. And when I looked into it, there was definitely a backstory and it's worth talking about. Well, I think the first source to consider is Pakistan's official websites or social media outlets. And so that's what I did. I saw that on their Twitter account, they did tweet about their decision to nominate Trump. And when you read their tweet, it's not just, he's a great person, let's nominate him. There is definitely a reasoning for it that to me makes sense. I would say that the main reason they chose to nominate him is because of his intervention when it came to the India-Pakistan conflict. And Pakistan mentioned that so many innocent lives of women and children were at stake and that the US choosing to intervene was something that might have saved millions of people in the region, but also in Pakistan itself, because Pakistan and India both hold nuclear arms, from what I understand. What they also said in the statement was that it wasn't just because of what they did for India, but also because Trump offered to find a resolution when it comes to the situation in Jammu and Kashmir, where India and Pakistan are also clashing. This is when the US was not involved in attacking Iran yet openly. And so they also mentioned that they would hope that the US would help stop that conflict as well. Unfortunately, after they tweeted this, the US did join openly the attack on Iran. But that's also when Pakistan formally, officially condemned the US for what they did. They also sent out a tweet about this really like the next day. I think it's important to consider that when it comes to India, the US and India are great friends, Modi and Trump, but the US chose not to turn its back on Pakistan and even tighten their bond, which could put the relationship between India and the US at risk. And that's something that Pakistan also knows. This is something that Reuters even talked about, because the US formally invited the head of the army in the Oval Office for lunch, which is something that could possibly strain the relationship between India and Pakistan. Another angle, which I think people seriously need to consider, is that India refuses to give credit to the US for stopping the war between Pakistan and India. And this is something that Modi has been very determined on. And I think the decision by Pakistan to then insist that the US did have something to do with it and go even as far as nominating Trump for an award was almost to annoy them rather than just being like, okay, this is really true. And I have to be honest, I thought that was kind of funny. The reason why I made this video is because you have a lot of influencers, you have a lot of news outlets who immediately take the opportunity to stir up a lot of emotions when it comes to a situation like this. And that's also the only thing I've seen so far. People make those Canva created images where they will write headlines but not a backstory. And in my observation, this is something that's done to rile up the community. I think it's very healthy to, first of all, inform yourself on what really happened and what were the motives of Pakistan to do that. But second of all, to also think the best of each other. I think it's very healthy, but also it's a command of Allah. So it's not something that we, can do whenever we feel like it. It's actually something that we always should do. Living in a Muslim country, I also have to say that I started appreciating how much social cohesion matters. When you have a lot of social cohesion, there tends to be also a limit to what you can say and how you can say that. And in my personal experience, that's not something negative. That is something very positive. And I would hope that amongst Muslims, we would also adhere to these types of principles, where we do try to be careful in what we say to each other and about each other. And I understand that some people, they think like, okay, but it's allowed to say something about Pakistan if it's true. Like if I'm going to say that they're actually siding with a state that's so monstrous and they're so demonic and they're this and that, like it's fine if it's true. That's what a lot of people say. And also they say, when something is wrong in Islam, you have to call it out. And I agree in a way, in a way I don't agree, because what I see is that a lot of people, regardless if they know something is true or not, they repost everything. And at the same time, another reason why a lot of people think it's justified to share negative news about Muslim countries is because they feel like, well, if it's true, it should be fine to repost it. But one thing that I think a lot of people don't notice is that some influencers, but also news outlets, they don't necessarily give a full picture of what's going on, and they don't necessarily have the same standard for all countries around the world. And what do I mean by that? I mean that a lot of these influencers I've noticed, but also news outlets, they choose to align with certain countries and they choose to turn their back against other countries. Like all the countries, obviously, we all have flaws. Every person has flaws, but you can see that they follow a certain agenda and push that type of information massively towards their viewers. I've seen this because of sects, for example, Shia influencers constantly breaking down Muslim countries who are Sunni, like GCC countries a lot. That's what I noticed. And I think a lot of people who follow these influencers, they're not aware that they're following a certain agenda, that they're pushing a certain agenda by reposting these things. And another thing that I have to be honest about is that I see that a lot of influencers don't just stir up emotion for ideological differences, but also sometimes because they're attached to a fundraiser. I think what's really important to know here, like I'm not against influencers taking a percentage of a fundraiser per se. I wouldn't do it myself, but I'm not necessarily against it for people, because in general, charities have a marketing budget as well. And in my opinion, I would rather have a charity give that marketing budget to an influencer than to, for example, Google Ads. So that first of all. But when I do think it's wrong is when they use fitna and chaos and emotion to get people to donate. So for example, they make these posts that are very controversial, that are very aggressive, and they get a lot of views, they get a lot of likes, and that's how they make money, because then people are like, oh, this person is really standing up for the Muslim community like a hero. We must support them. Then I feel like you're using your platform for the wrong reasons, and you're also making money in a way that I would not consider blessed money. And so I have to be honest, this all reminded me of another situation when Egypt was being massively attacked because of the symbolic march to the border of Egypt. I didn't expect it to be more than symbolic, and that was also the announcement before it took place. But also, every country, a sovereign country, has limitations. You cannot just go there and demand, for example, that they're going to take action based on the sovereignty of another country just because you went there. Like, that's not how things work. And also, if you would allow that as a country, you actually open up the way for others to also, march to a place and then demand a certain thing, which would just lead to chaos. You cannot accept such a thing. But then what happened is the people did march there, but then when they ended up at the border, they started pleading with these officers who clearly were not in the position to take any decisions. They were probably some lower ranking officers, and being like, oh brother, why aren't you helping your people? And why aren't you opening up the way for us? We care about the Palestinians. Aren't they your brothers? And I was like, first of all, that's kind of mean, because I know people in the comment section are cursing these people, looking at them like, oh, our enemy, even though their job is literally to stand there. They're not getting paid to make legislation. I mean, if anything, if you're going to march somewhere, you probably should be marching to the government so then they can make that type of decision, because that's just not up to the officers, So I feel again, it was such a fitna. It was such a it was too much controversy and making Egyptians look bad. And people were trashing Egyptians like crazy, and this is something that I really don't like throughout the whole conflict in the Middle East. We have one day it's oh, Egypt is a Jew, Jordan is a Jew, Pakistan is a Jew. Everybody is being trashed just because they're making decisions where they have to take into account the lives of millions of people living there, But then emotional people on the internet are oh no, but based on my feelings, I think you should be doing that, even though it's super unrealistic. And I'm not saying that all Egyptian people are good people, that it's just the people in the government who makes these decisions. I know that there's these businessmen that smuggle people out of Palestine for a lot of money. But at the same time, if I could say anything about Egyptians that I've gotten to know now that I live in the Middle East, is that they actually really love Palestinians. Some of them are super religious. They're super empathetic towards Palestinians. They really care about the goodness of the world. And I wouldn't be surprised if, just like there are businessmen who are smuggling people out of the country for money, I would say there's probably twice as many people and businessmen who are trying to smuggle Palestinians out for free. And obviously they cannot broadcast this on Instagram, but just like Jews were being smuggled out of countries and hidden in the mosque in Paris, I am 100% sure that there is a lot of Muslims out there who are also helping Palestinians, but it's not out there on the internet, and I'm pretty sure they couldn't even do that even if they wanted to, if they want to protect the people they're helping to escape. And that's the thing, we can think well of each other, we can think of all these scenarios, you could think of all these scenarios, but a lot of people, they choose not to do that, and then some people, they really come out with this jihad rhetoric where they're oh, but even if it costs us our lives, we should do it. But I've never read anywhere in any hadith or Quran that in the case of a conflict, that governments should also be sacrificing women and innocent people or children. I've never seen that. And we do live in times where if there is going to be a conflict, there is just no way where we can protect civilians. It's not like back in the day where wars were being fought over sea and land. Nowadays, with nuclear weapons, with chemical weapons, with bio warfare, or even climate warfare, they say you cannot protect all the people anymore, and women and children will have to be sacrificed in order to fight such a war. And so people like to glorify the leaders back in the day, saying oh, but those leaders, they were willing to sacrifice a lot of money. But it's one thing to sacrifice money because you're not going to trade with a country, but it's another thing to have another country drop bombs on residential buildings and perhaps even wipe out an entire population with a chemical weapon. That's just not comparable. And I mean, even those leaders, mashallah, they did great things, but they were eventually also taken out, right? There was no protecting these people. And I'm not saying that I'm saying it to protect myself. I don't care if I die, I die. I literally wouldn't mind. But at the same time, if I think about people around me who are innocent, who are very sensitive and vulnerable, I would never choose to sacrifice my entire community for another community. It doesn't work like that, Of the Prophet ﷺ has also said that a human life is worth more than the Kaaba. And sometimes people say, oh yeah, but we should sacrifice our lives for Al-Aqsa. But actually there is no hadith. I've never seen anything like that where it's okay, yeah, you should sacrifice your life for Al-Aqsa, but on top of that, you need to sacrifice the lives of all the women and the children in your country as well. It just doesn't work like that, And then, finally, I just want to say, I'm not saying all of this because I think Trump deserves an award. I do not necessarily want him to get an award, although I do think he's this type of person who loves to get credits. And I do think he would love it if he managed to also achieve peace in other parts of the world, although there's obviously also this theory about him not even being able to do that because he's being blackmailed. But I don't know much about that. But what I'm trying to say is, it's a popular thing to rile people up. And I know that I would get more views and more hits if I would also say something very aggressive about Pakistan and basically cause a divide. And, like a lot of people, they do, again, they want to retort to these scriptures about calling out evil or going to jihad. But it's weird because to me, it seems like there's so many scriptures and hadiths as well who tell us to be very careful when it comes to aggression and to be very sure about what you're saying before you. I do think it's a mix of things. One is misinformation. There's so much misinformation out there that people get very riled up and they're not aware that they're being misled. And that's obviously also one of the signs of the end of time, that there's going to be a lot of turmoil. There's going to be a lot of misinformation. People will not know about their religion, and there's going to be a lot of killing. So that, first of all. But one of my followers, she showed me a beautiful hadith. Her name is Mariam from Kuwait. Mariam, thank you so much for sharing. And she showed me a hadith that said that, in these times of trial and tribulation, that the best thing to do is to sometimes do nothing at all, because you literally just don't know anymore what's going on. And I mean, I looked for the explanation of the hadith on Islam Q&A as well, because, I think it's really important to have background information, especially for me. Okay, it says there will be soon a period of turmoil in which the one who sits will be better than the one who stands, and the one who stands will be better than the one who walks, and the one who walks will be better than the one who runs. He who would watch them will be drawn by them. So he who finds a refuge or shelter against it should make it as his resort. Okay, and so I just want to add what Islam Q&A says about it. They said what is meant by these tribulations is what will happen among the Muslims of fighting, hatred, and enmity or disputes over worldly matters without stating which of the two parties is in the right or wrong. This is a warning against tribulation and encourages us to avoid getting involved in it. And it tells us that it's evil that a person may acquire from it will be according to how much he is involved in it. Okay, so yeah, that's what I wanted to share with you. And then finally, I want to just share a short disclaimer. First of all, I'm not saying this because I'm Pakistani, because I'm actually not Pakistani, because I get that people are trying to think, like, why would she say such a thing? The second thing is, I get sometimes when you try to preach against jihad that people think you're like a colonizer plant, like you've been planted by the opposite party just to discourage Muslims from doing this. But at the same time, like I've also made a lot of content about how colonizers tried to discourage Muslims from going to jihad in the past. So, I mean, that just doesn't apply to me. Second, a lot of people say that I get paid by a country. They'll always be like, oh, one day it's like, oh, you get paid by the US. The next is like, oh, you get paid by Saudi. The next day it's like, oh, you get paid by Jordan. Like, I am sure now it's going to be like, oh, you get paid by Egypt and you get paid by Pakistan. But I don't get paid by anyone. I would never take money. No, may Allah protect me from ever taking that decision where I would take money just to spread misinformation. Like, that would be insane. I am not doing that right now. I can tell you that. And I just want to remind people that speaking highly of Muslims, that's literally my brand. Like, I've only spoken positively about Muslims in India, Muslims in the Philippines, Muslims amongst the natives in America, Muslims in Africa, Muslims in the GCC, Muslims in Europe. Like, that's literally just what I do, because in a world where people are mobilized on a massive scale to talk negatively about Muslims, you will not catch me speaking negative about Muslims. I will always point out how we Muslims have reason to see the best in each other and to remind each other that no Muslim amongst us will be doing something that's bad for the other. Like, I 100% assume the most positive from my brothers and sisters. And, I invite you to do the same with me, to also follow the command of Allah and assume positively of each other, And then finally, I just want to say, like, there's also a hadith where it's been reported that the Prophet ﷺ says that even when you say something behind the back of your fellow Muslim and it's true, this would be considered backbiting. You shouldn't do it. Even if you say something and it's not true, which is slander, then you also shouldn't say it. So, like, all these reasonings we have about why we want to talk badly about Muslims, but we don't have the facts. We didn't even take a minute to read why they did what they did. It's just not something that's encouraged to do. End of the day, I love all Muslims, but when I see that there's an organized effort to speak ill about any Muslim community, I would like to be the one to be like, hey, you know, let's not do that. Let's look at what's going on, first of all. And then second, let's also remember that it's really good to assume positively. Like, that's a comment from Allah for a reason, right? It's not something that he just said because it's good to keep people positive and just like happy. It's something that's very healthy for our community. And maybe you don't understand it, but not everything that you don't understand is something that you shouldn't do. Okay, anyways, guys, that's all for today. I want to ask you, please subscribe to my channel if you like this and you want to hear more positive content about your Muslim brothers and sisters. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future.